Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Travis Rosbach with me. Travis is currently the founder of the Tumalo Group and is also most well known for being the founder of Hydro Flask. Travis, thank you so much for joining us.
Arnav, it's awesome to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thankful to have you on. For people that might not know, can you take us back to the beginning? Where you grew up, your family situation, what type of kid you were, things like that.
Who, in a nutshell, I can imagine because I don't know how many days we have for this. Yeah, I grew up in Salem, Oregon, in the Willamette Valley, and um, my dad took off when I was really young. I haven't been able to get an exact number from either my mom nor my dad as to what that means. Real young, and my mom remarried when I was 5, and just a kind of a rough time there. I had a couple brothers, and my mom took off to Romania and adopted my Romanian gypsy sister, which, if you don't have a Romanian gypsy in your family, you don't know what you're missing. It's pretty exciting. And then when I was 12, they divorced. My mom divorced my stepdad, and when I was 14, my dad reached out, and I flew down to St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands to go spend time with him. Tried to move down there at 16 to finish school, but my math grades were atrocious, and they said they'd have to hold me back a couple times if I wanted to stay. So I said no to that. So I finally got back to Salem and negotiated my way out of high school. I did not want to be there. I just wanted to be in the Caribbean scuba diving, and just typical hooligan shit. Excuse my language. That
No, you're good.
typical teenage boy stuff,
Yeah.
and nothing outrageous. And then after I graduated, I moved back home to St. Croix and became a dive master, dive instructor, and then eventually got my 50-ton merchant marine officer captain's license, basically. And I did that for a number of years, and I would take off and travel in the summertime when the diving got slow and the crime rates would go up because there wasn't a lot going on. I'd save up my money throughout the winters, and then in the summers take off to far off lands to go scuba dive and visit the oceans and the people that live there. And then I became a commercial airline pilot, flying for Seaborne Airlines, flying seaplanes, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and Puerto Rico, and had a hell of a good time doing that. Moved up to Florida, became a charter jet pilot, predominantly in Lear 35s, Hawkers, Falcons, Citations, things like that, King Air a little bit. And my main passion was always really business. I inherited a fairly large bookshelf. What's bigger than it? Like, when I think of a bookshelf, I think of just like one shelf. But like, what's a big ass book thing called? Like a bookcase, maybe, or
I
you know,
guess,
like
yeah.
like a bookcase, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I inherited like multiple shelves with a lot of business books on it when I was about 12. Our neighbor died, and um, the Willamette Valley, it rains a lot. So I spent a lot of time indoors, especially in the wintertime, reading, and I was grounded a lot. So, I had my books, and that was about it. And I was always really drawn to business. And so after my flying, after I kind of accomplished all of the flight goals that I had and all the planes that I wanted to fly, there was like maybe one or two planes that I haven't yet flown, but most of those goals were accomplished. I moved home to Oregon and started doing business, and had a number of businesses here in Oregon, and then moved out to Hawaii, started more businesses in Hawaii, and then started Hydro Flask, the vacuum insulated water bottle company. Sold it, took off again all around the world, and just started traveling again. And then this is kind of a real real overview here.
Yeah.
And then after that, after traveling around and trying to be sort of semi-retired, I found that it didn't really work. I wasn't really happy. So, and people kept asking me, different, like, come consult, come do advising, come do help. And
Yep.
so I started the Tumalo Group to basically just help people do business stuff. And, I'm not really a fan of my own website. I think it kind of sucks and it doesn't really say what it is or does. But I don't really also know how to articulate it. It's like, sometimes I just like channel business. It just kind of comes through me. And so that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also, now I have, I'm homesteading. I'm building a house out on quite a bit of property and living with snow and ice and chainsaws and contractors and all kinds of crazy shit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what's keeping me busy now.
Yeah. No, an amazing life. Um, so Travis, going back to closer to the beginning, you talked about divorce being prevalent early in your childhood. I'm curious, as you look back on that, um, do you have any, you know, pieces of advice to your younger self or to anyone out there that is going through divorce as a child? Is there something as you look back on you wish you had the wisdom of knowing?
Oof. I think in in hindsight or looking back, I think that there's a lot of ways we can look at our situation, but I've read a lot of books and I've met a lot of really highly successful people, and I think that a lot of us that have been successful, I'll lump myself into that. Um,
Yeah, 100%.
we come from divorced families. I think that it can either make you or break you, and if you don't let it break you, then it can absolutely make you. And you know I now have a daughter, and her mother and I are divorced, and I recognize that my daughter has two parents that love her tremendously, and to spend time with my daughter when I have her, it's a week on, week off, week on, week off. So those weeks I have her, it's just awesome because it's her and I, and I'm a single dad, so it's just she and I, and it's one on one. And then when Friday rolls around, I'm kind of excited for that too, because then I get to recharge my batteries. I get to go back into bachelor mode, for better or worse. And um, I think that I think it's just a matter of perception, whether it's a bad thing or a good thing. But it's not always easy at 12 years old to comprehend that. I never knew my dad until I was 14. I just knew a stepdad starting at 5 to 12, and I knew I did not like that man in the least bit. And he was a Vietnam vet, Agent Orange, alcohol, drugs. It was bad. And yet now, at 30, um, no shit, not 30, 40. I'm 43 now. He's my electrician. And like, he and I get along fine. And I recognize, and this is years of AA and, being locked up and all the shit that he's gone through to get to where he is now. I recognize him as a human. And so he and I get along, and I forgave him. I forgive him. And I recognize that he didn't want to go to Vietnam. He didn't want to get exposed to Agent Orange. The drugs and the alcohol were sort of a byproduct of his generation. And so it's been cathartic. It's been a little bit strange, but and then I lost my brother, his son, and so that kind of bonds us a little bit as well. So
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to hear that. Um,
Yeah,
obviously it's
don't do heroin is the moral of that story. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Um, obviously it seemed like your stepfather was going through a lot on his own, mentally based on previous experiences. But I'm curious if you have any, as you look back, do you have any pieces of advice to someone becoming a stepdad? How to adjust, you know, or how to, from the child's perspective, how to create trust or, um, a good relationship?
Well, that's an interesting one too. I became a stepdad with my ex-wife. She had a couple boys, um, and I think that becoming a stepdad is just it's just go slow and take it easy. Don't try to rush in and fill any positions. Just if those positions are going to happen, let them happen naturally, and maybe not be the first ones to instigate it. Let the kids warm up naturally to you. And also, I think what was kind of cool about being a stepdad also was that I was kind of like a big brother a little bit, so I was kind of like the cool big brother, but I was also that fatherly figure. So I think the other part of it is try to stick more towards the fatherly side than the brotherly side, because if you're more of a brother, they don't respect you as much. If it's like you got to be the alpha male, but at the same time their dad is the alpha male, so you're kind of like the other alpha, but he's the alpha-ist alpha, right? To put it
Yeah,
into dog
yeah,
terms, which I do a lot with kids. I find
yeah,
that raising dogs and raising kids is kind of similar.
yeah,
A lot of the dog training books that I've read and obedience training, maybe not the obedience training, but maybe a little bit, yeah. I mean, that I've done over the years has helped me as a father also. It's a pack member and the leader of the pack, and here's how the wolves did it, do it and did it. And of course humans are very different, and things like that, but there, for me, there is a semblance, there's a word there, similarity,
yeah,
there's similarities between the two.
yeah. Um, you know, I don't interview, and maybe this is on me. I don't tend to have a lot of guests that, you know, right after high school didn't go to college, right? You have a unique story there. I'm curious, was that something, you know, you were thinking about doing, or what was, or did you know in high school I'm taking a different path in life?
I always knew I was taking a different path in life, always. But then also, I grew up like right in smack dab on the middle of a hill. And at the top of the hill was the governor's mansion with the big houses. And then at the bottom was the railroad tracks with the homeless people. And I was right in the middle. So I could go down the hill and buy, shoulder tap and hang out with the homeless bums and go drink with the homeless people. And I had a hell of a good time with them. And then I could also go to the top of the hill and go visit the wealthy kids and spend time in that environment. And and I enjoyed both of those worlds. I felt like, and to this day, I've got friends that are billionaires and I've got friends that are ex-felons and
Mm.
everybody in between. And for me, that's the great thing about life is just knowing as many people as I can and being able, like, because I feel like I can relate to both the
Mhm.
billionaire and the ex, or the felon. Um, and college was never really in the family. That was never really, we never talked about college growing up. There was never, we didn't sit around the table and talk about college because there was never any money for it. That was not in the family history. And so the first time I really heard about like Travis and college in the same sentence was I was on swim team, and my senior year, I was told that Stanford had come up to get me to come to give me a scholarship to go to swim? And I said,
Wow.
no. Like
Oh, yeah.
I'm I'm a I'm
Yeah.
a dive instructor in the
Yeah.
Virgin Islands. I just haven't done that yet. But
Yeah.
2 days after I graduated, I was back home in the Caribbean, and that's really what I wanted to do was run the dive shop, get into the family business, and do that. And so school was never really on the front of my mind. And then when I became an airline pilot, well, as I was getting my piloting licenses and certificates and all that, they told me that I needed to have at least a bachelor's degree to get into the airlines. And so I started Utah Valley State College at the time online. It was the
Oh, I
very first
apologize.
online.
I apologize. I didn't realize that.
What? Oh, no, no, no. Oh, no.
No,
Well,
I
I started
apologize.
it.
I didn't know
It
you were a
was
college graduate. I apologize.
Oh, no, no, no. I
Yeah.
never did graduate though.
Oh, okay.
I started, and it was some of the very first online classes that were out there, and I started, and I really enjoyed the aviation classes. All of the other prerequisites, I would have my girlfriends take those classes for me. And it was like, this is really cool that it's online because I don't know how to do this, but she does. And so
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend who did that. And then I started flying for the airlines. And when that happened, I instantly was done with college and haven't been back since. In fact, they contacted me and they said, hey, please, would you come and graduate for us so we could, no,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I'm not interested. So
I'm curious. How do you think about that issue? I think it's being continually debated, whether college is worth it or not. Would you like to see some sort of change in the system for kids in high school that know maybe they don't want to go that route, or um yeah, do you have any thoughts on that in general?
I really living in the UK. I was my first wife was British, and so we moved over and lived in the UK, and I really appreciate the gap year. I think that the gap year and just traveling as much as I have, meeting backpackers from all over the planet in their gap year, I think is I think it should be a bigger part of the American culture. I don't think that going, you know, graduating in June and then starting college in September, I don't think that summer break is enough. I think that a year and 3 months at least should be almost a prerequisite, because the amount of knowledge that you can obtain from being out on another continent is tremendous. And I can't imagine. And then also, if you know what you want to do it when you're young, and by the time you graduate high school and you want to go into that field and you're just dead set, then by all means, if it's a calling, go do that. Even if you get done with college and you don't pursue that any further, at least at least you've got that under your belt. But I think for parents to push their kids into college is bullshit. I don't like that. And now that I'm the fatherly age and I have friends that are doing that to their kids, I call them out all the time. That's not cool. Let them go experience what the far side of the world has to offer. And then if they come back and they still want to be an accountant, well, then go to accounting school, because they might come back and say, well, now I want to do history. Well,
Mhm.
aren't you glad you didn't become a bloody accountant? Right.
Yeah.
So
No, that's a good perspective. So you spoke about it a little bit. Um, uh, you know, going, as soon as you finished high school, you knew you would go back, um, you know, to the U.S. Virgin Islands, to work at your dad's shop. I'm curious, was that something you developed a wanting to do over the summers in high school? Was that your dad wanting you to? Like, how much of that was, he wants
uh,
you to take on the reins, or how much of that was your own personal desires?
It was Jacques Cousteau, I think, really, when I was, really, really young. The repeats on, I think it was the ABC or whatever it was, the Jacques Cousteau Sunday night programs. I just was enthralled, and this was before I knew that I even had a family member that was in scuba diving.
Mm.
I had a longing and a passion to get under the water and to go explore tropical locations. And then one day it was pouring down rain and freezing cold, and we get a knock at the door, and there's my grandpa, and he says, "Hey, you want to go meet your dad?" Okay, is he in Portland? Is he in Salem? Where is he? He's in St. Croix. Where is St. Croix? It's in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Where are the U.S. Virgin Islands? That sounds, like, is that over by Africa or where is that? Like I had no idea. And then getting down there, oh my God, like I was at home. And the first time I got underwater, I knew that that's where I wanted to be. And there was no, scholarship that was going to keep me from it. And then as I moved down there, he found that, and that he had somebody he could trust to run the dive shop. He could trust me with the money. He could trust me with the keys. He could trust me with the shotgun. And all three of those things were critical to running the dive shop. And so he found that he could leave me behind and he could take off and go travel the world. And then he got a girlfriend, and then she was his fiance, and then now with his wife. And she, as she moved into the picture, she didn't like me around because I was really the one kind of running the shop, and I was,
Mm.
kind of taking over the business. And, you know, he and I were like really good buddies. Plus, he was my dad, to boot. And so she didn't really like me being around. And so either they would leave or no, it was time for me to head out. So, I'd come back for about 6 months or so, and I'd dive and save some money, and I'd help in the winter times. And then I'd take off to, wherever in the, or excuse me, I'd dive in the winter times, and then the summers I'd take off and go travel. So I didn't have to be around them. Or worse yet, I would stay in the summers and they would leave, and I'd be running the shop in the summertime, which was always, it was difficult. Not a lot of customers, not a lot of people around, and the crime rate goes up. So we were robbed quite often, and shootouts and all that shit. So I'd like to leave in the summers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess obviously you have the hindsight of time. Um, do you think that was helpful? In terms of learning business, in terms of learning problem solving, and what you would end. Any of the that time taught you any lessons that might have helped you later on in life?
Yeah, totally. I um when I was 12, I inherited that aforementioned bookshelf, and it was like Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Anthony Robbins, Wayne Dyer, a lot of the great business books, and how to do business and how to negotiate and persuasion and sales and things like that. And so I had a book knowledge of how business was supposed to work. But then sitting there at night counting the cash and having to pay the employees was radically different. And so learning how to, you know, go down to the market and exchange, money for goods that we needed to, propagate the business in St. Croix in the 90s was radically different than what the business books were written in, the California setting,
Mm.
Silicon Valley, or that, New York setting. It was radically different, but very much kind of a gritty, crash course into business. And okay, well, if we're going to get robbed, what money do you give them? Do you give them all of the cash from the drawer? Well, okay, we don't want to do that, obviously. So where do you keep the cash so that if you do get robbed, you can give them enough to make them look think that they got all the money, but by golly, you still got some cash underneath, so you can start the business again tomorrow. Like that, I didn't ever hear Brian Tracy tell me about. know?
That's on the
And
job training right there.
yeah, yeah, for real.
Yeah, yeah. Um, that so were you were obviously robbed then, I assume.
We had multiple shootouts.
Oh wow.
We
Okay.
had I was ethered once. My girlfriend had a shotgun in her mouth. Our downstairs neighbor was raped. The first time I got shot at, I was 14. Um,
Wow.
so yeah,
Jeez.
but my golly, by gosh, I just love it though. Like I love the Virgin Islands, and I want people to go there, but go there in the wintertime when it's a little safer, when there's a little bit more money flowing, and it's better then. I'd love nothing more than go down and become like, I don't know if they'd ever have a white lieutenant governor, but I would love to go down there and just like get into politics or something. And I would not do that anywhere else on the planet besides the Virgin Islands, because I would love to help the islands help themselves. And that's really what I see that they need to start helping themselves more, because they're treated like our Native Americans or the Aborigines are treated in Australia, and they're treated, well, I can say they're treated like a redheaded stepchild, right? So.
Yeah. Family business. Do you have any thoughts on that, or any warnings to any, sons or daughters thinking about joining, um, a family business?
It is tough. I think it's harder to work for a family bit. I know,
Yeah.
I know for a fact it's harder to work for a family business than any other business. The expectations are so high, and the passion. I was fortunate enough that I had real passion for the industry. I meet a lot of people who have kids, or they're kids of multi-generational entrepreneurial endeavors, that they don't have the passion. I've got a buddy who, his dad has a plumbing supply company. He never wanted to be in the plumbing industry, but that's where he is. Well, now you're middle of your life, as they say, and you've been in the plumbing industry for 20 years. How you doing with that? He's midlife crisis kick up, they running off with the strippers and the bartenders and the getting the tattoos, the piercings, and the motorcycles. Well, yeah, no shit. Like you never you never wanted to be in the first place, and now
Yeah.
you're trying to push your son into it also. Bullocks to you. So, but at the same time, it can be a good thing. It can be like a real insider's, you know, lesson into business, because this is my experience. I can only speak about my experience, but my dad gave me he opened the book and said, here, these are the real numbers. This is really how it works. This is what I'm really thinking about this employee or that employee, or about this bill or that bank. Or he gave me all of that. And being a business owner years later, I never gave any of that to my employees. My employees had no idea what the real numbers were, or what I really thought about them, or that or the other. I would keep that. It was my job to keep that to myself. But if I had a child, yeah, like I want the child to know everything about everything about everything. And that you don't necessarily get going to work for other people, which can be a benefit, because you learn so much more from really knowing what's going on. You're not just a cubicle worker. You're the first in and you're the last out.
Yeah.
And you're there when nobody else is there.
Yeah. Scuba diving. Any recommendations for people that might be afraid of trying it out, or, what's the beauty, or what's the amazing part of scuba diving?
It's like freedom from gravity. It's you breathe in, you go up, you exhale, you go down, and you just think, and you float up towards, and you think, and you sink down towards. It's silent, and yet there's a lot going on. You can hear the little crustaceans popping and crackling, and you can hear the fish chewing on things, and nobody's giving you shit. nobody's asking you for anything, which is awesome. And being able to see, we know less about the undersea world than we know about. I mean, Elon Musk is trying to get us out to Mars, if there is such thing about Mars, which is a whole different topic. But they're trying to go out. Well, why don't we just spend more time going under and learning about that? And let's try to eradicate some of the microplastics rather than trying to just abandon ship and abort off to Mars we go.
Yeah.
Well, like if we could have more ocean conservation in school and more and Jaws. I was thinking about this the other day. Was it Steven Spielberg who did Jaws?
I believe so.
I think it
Yeah.
was. I think he needs to. I think he needs. I think he's. They've said that
Yeah, it was Spielberg. Yep.
it was the worst movie in history for sharks. I mean, that did more to damage our environment than any other single activity ever has. He needs to feel pretty bad about that. And I feel like I'm going to call him out and say he needs to do something about it. Whether he puts out another movie that's pro sharks, or whatever he comes up with, but it's not scary. I get claustrophobic. I don't pronounce that word, articulate that word well, but I get claustrophobic in like confined areas. Not scuba diving. I have no problem scuba diving. It's a large, but I also like warm tropical waters where I can have great visibility. Yeah, I just love it, and it's just the even the pressure. You don't feel it, but at the same time, it's like this it's just a nice warm hug. It's tranquil. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome. So at some point during this time, the idea of becoming, an airline pilot comes into your head. Can you talk about that process and, how you became a commercial airline pilot for Seaborne Airlines?
Well, I'd been on a yacht and they wanted me to take over the captain's position. And I didn't really want to do that. I didn't like the captain, and I didn't really, I didn't like, I was kind of like, I'd been to all of the ports, throughout the Caribbean, and I was kind of bored with being a boat captain. And so one day I quit, and I was walking down the boardwalk and I was like, oh shit, like I just passed up more money than I can even imagine. What am I going to do? And I thought, I guess I'll get back on a boat, being a captain for a charter company or a parasail boat or something like that. And I was living in Sapphire Beach in St. Thomas, and I was at the grocery store. Well, I was getting my laundry done, and I only had like $21 to my name. And I went to the grocery store to get macaroni and cheese and water and hot dogs. And I saw this magazine that said flying. And I was like, I'd never, like, I don't know what it was, but like there's a door opened, and I went through the door, and my consciousness expanded. And all of a sudden I was on the other side of where I had been before I saw the magazine. And I picked it up and I was like, oh wow, this is it. And I kind of held it up and I kind of looked around like, you guys, why did you all miss this?
Yeah.
It's sitting right, like I have the golden ticket. It's right here. And I remember this woman looked at me and she just shook her head like, you crazy little white boy, Like, I don't think you know what power this has. And I did not know.
Yeah.
And so I went back over to get my laundry, and because I bought the magazine, I didn't have enough money to buy my laundry to get a t-shirt back. And so the old St. Thomian woman, she was like, nope, here's, you can have 2 t-shirts and 2 shorts, but you can't afford the third t-shirt. Like, I don't need that third t-shirt. I'm a pilot. And I went home and I sat there eating my macaroni and cheese, and the landlord's knocking on the door telling me, I've got rent due and I've got like $4 to my name. But it didn't matter because I was a pilot. And I started calling flight schools, and they're like 180 grand to become a pilot. I was like, well, that's not accurate. I don't know why you think that that's going to be the case. And so I hung up and I called another one, and they said the same thing. They're like 180 grand. Like, no, you're not hearing what I'm saying here. I want to be a pilot. I want to fly for the Seaborne Airlines. And they're like, oh, okay, well, it's, we go through the math and everything. And well, I'll be damned if 3 or 4 of them didn't come up with the same number. And so I was a bit bummed for a minute. And then I thought, well, I'm going to call one more. And so I called one more, and he goes, well, did you graduate college? I'm like, no, I don't know anything about college. He's like, well, if you go to school, you can get student loans. I'm like, what are student loans? And he's like, okay, we got to start at the beginning here. And so hung up with him. He taught me all about student loans and Sally Mae and all, subsidized and
Yeah.
unsubsidized. And I'm writing just as quick as I can. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I got $4 to my name. Landlord wants his money. What am I going to do here? My mom called and said my great grandma had died. And we knew that was coming. She was old people
Yeah.
die.
Sorry.
Still bummed. Oh yeah, it's that's sad. But what's happening to her house? And my mom's like, well, it's on the market. Nobody's living there. Nope. Can I live there? Yep. So I sold my truck and flew back home to Salem. And that was April 2001. And I called Seaborne Airlines, and they said in September 2001, we have a training course. I said, I'll be there. And went in the next day to get my flight training. And they're like, no way are you going to become a pilot and fly for the airlines by September. But I was determined. And then September 11 happened. And in reality, that was too quick anyway. But I just stuck it out, and I started going to flight training, and I found like what was working and what was not working, and what schools were legit and what ones just wanted to keep me there to make more money. And I went to a school called Airline Transport Professionals, ATP, and I was stationed in, well, they call it Phoenix, but it was actually Mesa. And I flew all over the country getting multi-engine time, and got all my ratings, and then moved back home to the Caribbean to start flying.
Yeah. What's the best part of aviation and flying?
I think one of the coolest things is that, like, I love to explore. I love to go journey and go see like what's over that mountaintop or what's just beyond that desert. So being able to fly myself was it was it was liberating, and it really builds a lot of confidence. There were times I remember here in Oregon, I was flying over Crater Lake, and I got sucked in. I got caught in a downdraft and sucked in to Crater Lake. And at first, it was really cool because it's like, hey, I'm in Crater Lake flying around, and the walls were above me. But then pretty soon, the other side of it was coming up, and I was pulled back in as much power as possible, and I wasn't going up. And I thought, well, here I go. I'm going to auger in and die at Crater Lake.
Wow.
So I made preparations to crash, and just at the last millisecond, I got just barely up enough, and I look out, and the wheel hit the top of the tree, but fuck, I made it home, and it was like,
Yeah.
okay, I learned a lot from that, and so it kind of puts our everyday issues and problems that we have on Earth, on terra firma, into more perspective. It's like, if we don't have an engine out, if there's no fire, we're safe. You run out of gas, you pull over. Nowadays we have cell phones. Up in the sky, under the water, you don't have those luxuries. You got to be self-reliant. And I think that both, scuba diving, boat captaining, and flying all taught me a bit of, self-reliance, but also terra firma problems are not as dangerous as you know extraterrestrial issues or
Yeah.
under the sea issues.
Yeah. So you then become a charter jet pilot for Fairwind Air Charter,
Yep.
and then you moved to Hawaii.
Mhm.
Talk to us about that change.
Yeah, I was at I started bend we my girlfriend at the time, we started bend fencing, and just on a like just a Thursday afternoon on a bottle of wine, we decided we owned a fence company and ran that for about a year before I just was like, it's 18 degrees. I'm freezing cold. I'm working 7 days a week. I'm digging holes in the ice. This fucking sucks. I need a break. And so I called her and I said, look, I'm going to kill myself or somebody else. I got to get out of here somewhere warm, Mexico or Hawaii. And I never, even though I'm from Oregon, I always went to the Virgin Islands. I never had been to Hawaii, which is kind of bass backwards because West Coasters typically go to Hawaii, East Coasters go to the VI. I'd never been to Hawaii. So she called back and she's like, you got to get up to PDX. We didn't really have Redmond at the time. You got to get up to Portland to go fly out. You're going off this afternoon. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I go home and pack my bags. Where am I going? Oh, you're going to Hawaii. Okay. Tell me again, like, really, what is Hawaii? Is that, I know it's a state, but am I going to the state of, like, what is this? And she's like, well, you're going micro specifically to Oahu is the island, and Honolulu and Waikiki. And so, okay. Like, now I know where I'm going. And I remember when the door opened of the plane, I was kind of towards the back, and I called her and I said, I live here now. You can keep the business, you can sell it. I don't care what you do. I live in Oahu. I live here. And she says, where are you? Who are these people? Are you at the bar? Are you drunk? What's going on? I said, no, I'm on the plane. I haven't even got off the plane. And she's like, you got to be kidding. I said, nope, I can feel the aloha. It's real. I live here. And I really miss the VI, you know? And so Hawaii was kind of like, it was an Americanized, you know, even though the USVI is American, and I put that in quotes for all that can't see, Hawaii is like a state and it's like America. It's like, you know, they use the greenback and they use the same plug-in as we do. And you can call 911 and you can have the police, you can have the emergency services, and you can go to 7-Eleven and not get robbed, you know, like it was cool. And so, yeah, I spent like a really long time. I was there for like 9 days in Waikiki, and oh my God, I did not want to leave. And so finally I left, I came back, and we found a buyer for the fence company who, you know, things were going really well because the economy was just on a complete upswing in 2007. And so we sold it and we bailed out to Oahu, and or well, first Maui and then Oahu, and then started that chapter.
Yeah. There you started a signs and screen painting business. Um, can you just talk to us about what got you into that, and maybe the lessons from, you know, building up a small business?
Yeah, the Oahu signs and screen printing was a lot of fun. Again, it was kind of one of these, you know, after a few beers, you know, what do we want to do? I don't know. Well, let's start a sign company, because there was 1,000 sign companies. Everybody and their cousin owned a plotter where they could plot vinyl, slap the vinyl on a banner and say, I got a sign company in Oahu, at least at that time. And it intrigued me that there was so much competition doing signs. And so we took off to Florida, went to a sign show, I think it's SGIA, the National Sign Convention in Orlando, and went up to a booth, Fellers, I think it was called, and was like we want to do a sign company. What do we need to buy? And he's like, well, just go talk to the salesman and buy whatever you want. We're like, no, we don't know. Will you please just tell us what we need? They're like, oh, Jesus. And so we bought vinyl and a plotter and a printer and learned how to weed and all of this. And we just bit the bullet and rented a space on one of the busiest boulevards on Honolulu up front towards the water, and started working with some of the largest companies on the island, printing banners and t-shirts, and like it just kept growing. They're like, well, we also need embroidered shirts. Okay, well, so we got into embroidery. Well, we need t-shirts. Okay, well, we got into screen printing. Well, we need the big ass signs out by the road. Okay, well, so we got into the big ass signs, and it just kind of kept growing, and we morphed into this agency almost. And it was really cool because we got to meet people who were starting businesses or who were already well established. We had some really big high-rise customers who they had their shit dialed, or at least they thought they did, and a lot of them did. But they would order the same thing over and over and over again. So we could kind of see like, okay, well, if you do this and that and the other, then you can be successful at that level. And then we had the startups that were getting into this and this and this, and how successful were they based on their purchases of this whole new world of textures and substrates and Pantone and PMS colors and all of that. And so the marketing side, the PR side, the copy side, all of that kind of metamorphosized into Oahu Science and Screen Printing, and we really learned a lot from that. I mean, it was a whole nother side of business. Like the fence company was Chamber of Commerce. It was hobnobbing. It was parties and banquets and diners and handshaking and business cards and door hangers and word of mouth and phone book ads and things like that, where the sign company was more like, what's a ream of paper? What does that even mean? And like, it was a whole nother kind of ancillary part of business that we didn't necessarily have at the fence company. And so when Hydroflask finally came, like we already had an agency in house. Like she and I were already our in-house agency, where when we tried to hire outside agencies, we're like, nah, man, like we're doing it way better than you are. And we don't need to, or at least half as good. And we don't need to pay those prices to have outsourced the stuff that we knew how to do on our own already. So when it came to merch and swag and swag is stuff we all get. Swag is shit we all get. And merch is stuff that we sell, right? Yeah. So we had swag, and merch. Well, we knew that. Like we knew about, so we weren't going to get taken. You're not going to charge me 3 times more for t-shirts when I know what they cost and I know where to get them and stuff. So that was a tremendous help with growing and just starting, and then also subsequently growing Hydroflask.
Yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit about your relationship with fear? For me, as I hear this, starting a fencing company, after a couple of years, or starting, sign and screen printing business, with no previous knowledge. Like this sounds scary to me. I would probably just go the corporate route and try to get a job somewhere, and try to learn this on the side for like 6 months before I entered, you know. What's your relationship with fear?
I don't know if it's healthy or not. I think that, going back to my stepdad, I had a lot of fear when I was real young. He would come home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was fucking scary. And to get through that, and then to get into high school, the bullies and the big tough kids in high school weren't that scary. They weren't all coked up and on alcohol, so I was never scared of the big kid. I always wanted to go take a shot at the biggest guy, actually. And, scuba diving and having people freak out underwater in my direct supervision and having to control that situation underwater where people are going to die if I drop the ball. Same thing up in the air. I flew passengers. I had people's grandkids in my direct supervision up in a potentially dangerous environment. And so getting through that and going into business, like, oh, well, the shipment's late. Yeah, big fucking deal. Nobody's going to die.
Yeah.
I know what it looks like when people die, and everybody's going to be okay. We're all going home. We're all going to go to our own beds tonight. We're all going to be sleeping well, but your order's not going to get there till tomorrow, and that's fine. So that's kind of like, like I try not to really be afraid of much. But I have a daughter, and so every once in a while I have fears like for her, and I want to instill some fear into her because I see that she is damn near fearless a lot of the time. So it like with her, I try to kind of like help her have a balance, but it's almost like the pot calling the kettle black. Who am I to know what the fuck balance of fear is, you
Yeah.
know? So excuse my language.
No, no, you're good. One other thing, transitioning to a totally different state, um, you know, adjusting to Hawaii, even making friends or anything like that. I mean, do you have any pieces of advice to someone who is making a similar change?
I say just go for it, and um, yeah, I mean, my first thought about making friends is, well, you just go down to the local bar and you find people, but tropical bars and taverns, on the back alley are radically different. Yeah, so that might not be the best piece of advice, but no, I think, like the cool thing about traveling is um, someone once told me, or I read somewhere that like, well, when you get to a new place, you can kind of reinvent yourself and be somebody who you never were before. And I always thought, well, that sounds kind of like a scam, like I never really got it. And then as I got older, I realized that kind of what that meant was you can leave behind parts of you that you don't want to bring with. You don't have to carry forward all of your old baggage or bad habits or whatever that is. You can become a brand new you, a better version of you, even as you get to a new locale. And then being the best version of yourself in this new location, other people will just naturally come out of the woodwork and they'll, congregate. Birds of a feather flock together. You can't soar at the eagles if you scratch with the chickens. So you go out, you find eagles, the eagles will come to you, and pretty soon you'll be what's a pack of eagles called?
I don't
A
know.
flock? Is it a
Yeah,
flock of
yeah,
eagles? I
maybe.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good advice. So
Eagle
soon,
pack.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, no, you're good. No, I have no idea. Soon after, I believe the idea for Hydroflask comes up. Um, can you tell us the story of that and how that was started?
Well, yeah, there was a lot of different um, pieces of it. There's no real just one answer to how it came about. There were multiple facets that all played a part in the accumulation of what is Hydro Flask, or what has become Hydro Flask. It basically started with I was thirsty and wanted to go buy a water bottle. And I also, when I was in flight school in the college days, I also worked at a rock climbing store. And I just fell madly in love with rock climbing. In my fingers now, I'm just starting to feel it at 43, which sucks. But um, I was I was thirsty. I wanted to go get a water bottle. I went into the sporting goods store one afternoon, and they took me to this big wall that was completely empty. And I was like, well, what happened? And yada yada, BPA, we don't know much about it. We took it off the shelves. Who's going to do this? Nobody. There's nobody else out there. I will do that. And it just came in, and it came right out my mouth. I don't know where it came from. I don't even know who said it, but it came out of my mouth. And the kid laughed at me. The sales associate laughed at me. But by the time he laughed at me, from me saying I will do that and him laughing at me, prior to that intersection, I saw the future, and I saw myself up on stage with a successful story about a water bottle company. So by the time he said that, I just kind of looked at him like, you don't know what you don't know, dude. And I kind of stumbled out of there in this foggy haze that now I'm a water bottle owner, company owner, right? And so, and it worked on so many levels, because I wanted a cool water bottle that was not dumb, and it wasn't plastic, and it wasn't aluminum. It didn't have BPA in it. I wanted a water bottle that could keep my temperature at that temperature, whether I go out and I go surf all day and I come in and I can still drink it because it's not too hot, or I can go snowboard all day and come back and drink it because it's not frozen. I didn't want it to dent. I didn't want it to be stupid. I wanted a cool water bottle, and they did not exist at that time. So I just set out to do that, and it was very much in line with like my what is this word, vision, my reason for life. I don't know what the word is, but my mantra, my desire, I guess desire we'll call it, my desire to help benefit the oceans and the planet. I was tired of cleaning up garbage and plastic water bottles off of our beach in front of our house. I no longer wanted to see that. I didn't, and I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to, you know, I wanted to eradicate plastic single-use water bottles, and I was naive enough to think that maybe I could make an impact. I was not looking for fortune. I was not looking for fame. I wasn't looking for any of that. I wanted to go into the water and not get hit in the head with a fucking plastic water bottle. And so that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, yeah. So talk to us a little bit about, um, getting it going, maybe, the patent process, or like what was the early process of getting idea to reality?
Yeah, well, it was it took a good couple years of long days, nights, and weekends, and we were still running the sign company, sort of like she was running the side hustle of the sign company to pay the bills as best we could, while I was working diligently to try to figure out how in the world do you create something from nothing. Um, and well, the short answer is China, right? Well, China is where we have been making products since, like, the late 80s, early 90s. We now, it used to be Japan, it used to be Korea, it used to be Taiwan, it used to be Mexico. Well, it's China. And so I figured out how to get over to China, and got into a plastic water bottle factory. And I was like, no, this is, like another translation error here. I'm not looking for plastic, I'm looking for metal.
Yeah.
No, we don't do that. And then thank goodness somebody like overheard a conversation. They're like, oh, I got a cousin. Everybody's got a cousin. And so you got to go down to Jinhua and Yun Kong. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. Could you help me out here? And so took me to the train station, got me on a train, got down to Hangzhou, and there's Natalie showed up at the train station. Luckily I was white, and I was the only one out of 4 million people at that train station, so I stood out, and she
Yeah.
recognized me, and we started making water bottles. And then I had a really good friend who was a patent attorney who her boyfriend was my jump instructor. I flew skydivers. My very first job as a pilot was flying skydivers. I'd drop people out of the plane. And her boyfriend was a good buddy of mine, and he was my instructor. So I trusted him and I trusted her. And she was in Salem, so she was close. And she was a bolt. She still is. Her name is Michelle. Michelle's just a bulldog. And she, like one day I was like, I want to trademark wherever there's, or it's always an adventure. No, hydrate your life. Hydrate your life was the trademark. And she came back and she's like, Pepsi's got it. I was like, all right, never mind. 2 weeks later, she comes back. She goes, we beat Pepsi. Like, that's why I got Michelle, and so she was our trademark and patent attorney, which, she still charged a lot of money. It's very expensive, but I knew that it was a fair price, and we trusted that. And even getting those patent pendings was enough to kind of keep the honest at honest and the potential competition at bay just for a little bit longer to give us really the jump start into the market. And as we started to grow and get bigger and bigger, people who had more knowledge, probably the people who went to college who had more knowledge, found that, we have design patents. It's not there's design and holy cow, the name escapes me for the other utility. Like, we only had design patents, and so anybody could take the technology. Thermos had been around forever doing glass and metal and these big ass heavy things. If you dropped it, you'd break your feet. And so, but having the patents gave us enough of a jump start to keep people at bay just a little bit longer, I feel. So yeah.
Yeah. And was it easy to get buy-in from customers early on? Was it just a matter of them, testing it out, or how were the early years of like trying to market it?
The sales were super easy, actually. It really was not difficult to sell them because it had not existed. And we started out at the Portland Saturday Market, and it's just kind of under the Burnside Bridge. And it's first we were told we weren't even allowed to sell there. They did not think that anybody would buy water bottles, and so there was no reason for us to, take up space. So they put us out on the train tracks. We had this little pop-up table, and I put ice in it, and I would literally just throw it at people, or push it into their space, and they would look at it and say, what's going on here? Well, there's ice, and it was put in there last night, and it's still there. And so the sales were easy. Relative, I mean, the sales, I think, were probably the easiest part. It sold itself. I mean, we had a good product at a very fair price. It enhanced people's lives. They would use them, they would get hydrated, they would feel better. Their spouses, their children, their neighbors would steal them, and they would need more. They'd come back, they'd buy 5 or 6 more. When they're standing at the booth and we're selling 10 water bottles to somebody, the potential customers look at that and they're like, what are you doing buying 10 more? Those are our, those return customers were our best salespeople. And so it became really easy to sell. And then we were at Munch and Music, which was like this, Ben still has it, I think, on Thursdays in the summer, but we had a little pop-up booth, and we're selling, and the business, or the newspaper business section guy, whatever it's called, the person, did just a wee little article on us. And the very next week, a guy came up and he said, hey, I saw you in the paper. I'm a sales rep. I'd like to be your sales rep. Well, I had no idea what a sales rep was. I was like, could you explain sales rep? And so he did. And he asked for, 12 bottles, which no way, we don't have that many. And I don't know you. I don't trust you. And but he was a sales rep, and he talked himself into, I think it was 12 bottles. And he called 2 days later and he says, how many do you have left? At that point, we had 600 bottles left. He goes, okay, those are mine. how many more are coming in and when do they get in? What are you talking about? He's like, I can sell the 600, no problem. I need more. Okay, well, we can get 1,500 more in. He's like, no, we need more. So we had, because our minimum order quantity had been 3,000. Well, we couldn't afford 3,000. We could only afford 1,500. So we had 1,500 on standby in China until we could come up with the money, and called China. Hey, I think we got the money. They sent us the other 1,500, and by golly, they sold even before they got here. And then we ordered 20,000, or I think it was either 10 or 20,000. They sold before we got here. We ordered 40,000, and then pretty soon we were doing 40,000 a month, and shit just got wild at that point.
Yeah. Can you talk about that? From idea stage to, like, I think 3 years later you were doing $2 million in revenue. That's a big change. Um
And I think that
how
number is
is that?
actually pretty low. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how is managing the growth?
That was difficult.
Mm,
I still to this day believe that the best business for me would have no customers and no employees, um, and no vendors. um, it was extremely difficult because, for a lot of reasons, but we were growing 600% a quarter, and just to keep up and just to pay for inventory was outrageous. I mean, the bottles still to this day only cost like $5.50. But when you times it by 40,000 pieces and shipping and everything else, and you gotta come up with that money. You gotta pay the factory. They take 30 days to make them. They take 30 days on the water. They reach, they get shipped out. The businesses that you sell them to are going to want net 30, or else they won't even talk to you or play with you. So you're 30 plus 30 plus 30 plus another 15. You're 100, 120, 150 days before you see any ROI
mm,
on that 40,000 piece order that you placed.
yeah.
And so that was bloody difficult. That was the hardest part, was just having enough cash to pay to play. And that was something that I never really fully appreciated or understood, that you can be too big and go out of business. You can be a
Mm,
product of your own success and still fail if you can't pay to play the game. And so we started taking on investors, and of course we started with friends and family, and then we quickly outgrew that, and then went into angels, and then they always say angel investors. They never talk about the demon investors, but I mean that should be. I mean, it seems like that's a 1-to-1 almost.
That's
Like nobody
funny.
ever really talks about the demon investors. I guess we call them sharks, and that's kind of
Yeah.
a Hollywoodized, very Americana bullshit name for them. But there's some fucking demon investors out there.
Yeah.
And you don't know that when you don't know that. You don't
Yeah.
know them if you don't know them, and you don't know what
Mm,
they're. It's like a marriage or a long-term relationship, getting into the proverbial bed with these investors, and you don't know what you're going to get, and the courtship is very quick. So that was always really tough, was the financial side, and obviously I don't have a family that could provide enough. And her family, I had a partner who, her family had some money, and they put it all in that they could. And but still you're looking at 250 grand every single month just for the inventory. That doesn't cover the lease, that doesn't cover the employees, that doesn't include the trade shows, that doesn't include anything else. And so you easily double that every single month, and my god, that's a lot of money.
yeah. Yeah. You talked about it. I didn't ask this before, but working with someone that you're in a relationship with, you'd obviously done it with the fence sign business, now this business. Is there something you would say to, a couple out there that's thinking about starting a business?
That was another really tricky part. Like our initial businesses together were sort of small and sort of run of the mill mom and pop companies that were big. I mean, we were still doing big numbers and big projects and big stuff, but they were very localized and they were very manageable. And I think that that was always kind of her lane was those kind of businesses. And so when we started to branch out and get into more difficult scenarios and uncharted waters, as it is or was, it got really tough and very stressful. And she would leave. She would just say, I'm done. I can't take the stress. I'm off. And she'd bail off to Hawaii, and she'd go running away, leaving me there by myself. And so that was always difficult. And I think somebody the other day asked me if I had any regrets about anything. And I think that in hindsight, looking back now, I can say that probably one of my regrets is keeping a partner after the partnership was over. And I probably should have terminated that when it became difficult, and then used that capital to bring in other like employees. I probably should have would have brought in a good COO or a good CEO at that point, as opposed to just, sending money over to Hawaii for God knows what. So that's difficult, so, and I think that every relationship is different. So I don't know that I have advice for partners in business. I also like, I'm a big Dale Carnegie fan, and I think it's how to grow your salary, or I can't remember the name of the book, one of those books, but he basically talks about like a husband and wife or parents that are in it to win it together, that they have the same goal. They've got kids, and we've also got a home, and we've got ourselves. And so I'm taking care of myself, but I'm also taking care of you and the kids, and you're taking care of yourself, but you're also taking care of me and the kids. And we're all moving this forward as a unit.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that's a brilliant concept. I just have not experienced it.
Yeah. I guess similar to what you were asked before, is there anything that you would say to your younger self now with the hindsight of, I guess, would it have been to hire a CEO, or I don't know. Is there anything else you would say to your younger self?
I try not to live with regrets, and if I do, I don't really hold them, or I try to rectify or change things as they happen so that I hopefully don't have regrets. And now I have words for it, where I try not to create additional karmas. I try to just negate the karmas that I've created, and not create additional. I think that, yeah, I think I had this vision for this company for a long term. I had it was just given to me. I don't know how or why, or, from what or from whom, but it was given to me almost as a gift. And I could see so much, and I just knew it. And to convey it to others around me, whether it be the marketing team or the sales team or a business partner, was difficult for me to articulate, and it was difficult because I knew what was going to happen, but I could not be cocky and arrogant, and I had to remember that I had to slow down. And we're starting right here because not everybody sees what Travis sees. And so I had to really, which was kind of isolating, because I had to be able to talk to the employees and to the customers and the vendors and those, everybody that comes along with running a big corporation. But I knew so much more, and so I held on really tightly, and it was mine,
Yeah.
and even though I had a marketing team that was doing marketing, I'd come in and I would have like, this just chicken scratch of words around in circles and circles and circles. And then I'd come to one middle point, and I'd come in and say, this is what we're doing now. And the marketing team would be like, shit, Travis, you just gave us this last Monday. Now you're giving us something brand new. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources. And so I would do it myself.
Mm.
And so doing doing a lot of this by myself was, um, it was tough to relinquish control. But at the same time, like, in hindsight, I guess I could say that it's better. It would have been better for me to work on the business than in the business. I probably could have accepted a CEO to work the business while I was on the outside working all the other ancillary big vision stuff. I'm more of a visionary than a day-to-day hustle grind in the cubicle in the office type of person. I really enjoyed flying overseas to open up new accounts and get new vendors. That's where I loved going to the military and to the NBA and to England and to all of these different countries to go open up new places. And that's probably, I loved going to trade shows and just seeing new technology and seeing how we could better ourselves. And so that's, in hindsight, I guess I could say I probably was, I could have probably, would have, should have worked on the business and not in the business so much.
Yeah, no, that's good advice for anybody with a business that's growing faster than they can handle. Um, so then, when does the idea of selling the business come up, and talk to us about that process?
Well, um, I can now I now look at it as like a season, and my seasons are typically about 4 or 5 years. And um, I get extreme tunnel vision and extremely focused, and I'm really curious about aviation, scuba diving, boat captaining, hydro flask, whatever it happens to be. I can really put my head down and just tune out everything else. The blinders come on. But then when the blinders start coming off even just a little bit, fuck, I get distracted
Yeah.
and I start looking around at like other possibilities, other stuff going on. And um, we were just absolutely rocket shipping. I don't know. I probably just made that up. We were exploding straight up.
Yeah.
And my brother had died.
Oh,
Again,
I'm sorry.
we don't do heroin.
Yeah.
Um, and I just got married, and my partner had left again, and she ran off with one of the employees, and
Wow.
there was a whole big, you know, all that was going on. And
Yeah.
I was I'd always heard this story that was always kind of in the back of my mind about the guy who invented Sam Adams, the beer, or he created it, I guess. He didn't invent beer, he created the brand Sam Adams. He said that when he saw a bottle cap somewhere out in the wild outside of, he's near you, isn't he?
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
Mass?
Boston. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
when he saw somebody or a bottle cap outside of the Massachusetts area,
Yeah.
he would have been like, he knew that he would have felt like he made it, like
Mhm.
he had done all that he had come to do.
Yeah.
And so I always kind of had that as a cool story in the back of my mind. And we were in Paris at the Louvre, or I don't know, some big museum, and I saw a hydro flask across
Mm.
the room. And it's like, I went over and I talked to the woman, and they were from Arizona, and she just loved it. She was so happy about it. And I think my brother or my wife or somebody said, "Well, this is the owner. This is the guy who did that."
Wow.
And she called her husband over, and her husband started crying that he got to meet the owner of this water bottle company. I was like, I'm done. I did it. Like, people know what this is. They fucking love it. I don't know that there's much more here for me to do. And got in the train back to England. I look at my email, and my email, they asked, the headquarters had asked me like just some random stupid stuff that I knew that they could have answered on their own. And yet they just kind of were like, I don't know. It just hit me like the season's done. I'm done. I'm ready to go do something else. And so I got back, and it was a fairly quick process because, again, like, you do well, people pay attention. They want a part of it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too difficult to find somebody to step in.
Any advice you would give to someone, who's in that process on, I don't know what to look out for, or um
I would,
I don't know.
yeah. I think having a mentor through that process, and I think also don't rush it. Like there are times that you probably do have to hurry and rush, but for the most part, don't rush the process. And it's okay to say no to potential buyers and work with, like right now, I work with people who are exiting all the time. And it's like what I did not know when I exited is tremendous. But now that I've been through it and I've seen others go through it, and I've been through it a few times since, like just little tiny pieces of tidbits of knowledge that I have, and others have a mentor. I think mentorship is big, because even what seems like just a little bit of advice could mean a big piece of the future. Like the future really hinges on that one very last signature, and that one last wet signature is a big deal, and it will affect the rest of your days going forward. So you really want to negotiate. You really want to make sure that you're comfortable and know what every single paragraph is. And some of these, I mean, these documents can be, 15 pounds worth of paperwork, and it's written in legalese, which is not
Yeah.
made for, a public school, Salem Kaiser public school dropout, fucking barely passed high school. It wasn't written for me to understand, and I did not have an attorney who really helped. He didn't really understand what was going on either. So I think have good legal advice, have a good mentor who's been there, done that before, and just slow down and not rush, and know that your whole entire future hinges on that one last signature page. And you need to be comfortable with it. You need to be happy with it, and not just happy now today, because there's a lot of emotions. I mean, I don't know what the where to look for this, but stress, there's very stressful times for people's lives: birth, death, marriage, moving, selling a business. Like I went through all of that within like a short compact amount of time. I go through all
Yeah.
of these emotions, and yeah, meditation would have been good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Breathing, drinking water,
Yeah.
and yeah, mentor.
Yeah. 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 100%. So, obviously you end up selling. How is that first day after? Are you grinning beyond, are you grinning the entire day? Like how is the post selling
Yeah,
process?
yeah. Well, it absolutely was, and it takes, it takes a couple days for the cash to actually hit the bank, and so there was a lot of, hey, is it in? Is it in? Is it in? Calling the bank and stuff. But as soon as it hit, I paid off my debts. I paid off my um, my family had not been paid off, and so, and a lot of my family members had worked with the company, and they had been shorted and stiffed and in a transition, and so we had to wait until I got paid, and then from my own pocket I paid off family and friends, and I paid those debts off. Again, good attorney would have been awesome. Um, and so that felt really good. I paid off all of my Sally Mae and all of my Fannie Mae or whatever the fuck. All of those student loans were
Yeah.
done. Like I
Yeah.
had no more debt,
Yeah.
and that was awesome. And then I get this little credit card that weighs 12 pounds. It's made out of metal. I call to activate it. I'm like, how much is the limit? And the guy's like, I don't see a limit, And so then like it was incredible. It was
Yeah.
an absolutely unreal experience. Yeah. And that happened in an April. And I remember in September waking up of that same year, and all of a sudden it had, like, the weight had lifted. Like it was like the first day of summer. It felt like that, but at the same time, it kind of felt like Sunday night before Monday going back to school, where it's like, okay, I'm going back to school tomorrow. And then it took me until September to realize, no, Travis, there's no more school for you to go back to,
Mm,
you know?
yeah, yeah.
And so it was like this kind of dichotomous, I don't know if that's the word, but I like it. It was like a dichotomy of first day of summer and shit, tomorrow is Monday and I got to go back to work, you know?
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, yeah,
How
it
is
was wild.
Yeah. Can you talk about managing that money? Any lessons you've learned on, making sure, it doesn't evaporate in 1 year or things like that?
Yeah. Well, I think like somebody told me like, basically take your money and then give yourself a percentage of it in cash, like in your house, in your wallet. Go buy your fun stuff, but this is how much you get for fun stuff. You want a Rolex, you got to buy it out of this amount. You want a fast car, you buy it from that amount. You do not touch your money. And that was a big help. The aforementioned credit card that had no limit. My financial advisor said, "Oh, yeah, bring it in. I want to see. I want to see the. He made up some little excuse. Bring it in. I want to look at it." Okay, so I brought it in. I showed him. He took it, and he couldn't cut it because it was metal. But he basically said, "This is mine. You don't get it. You don't get a credit card with no limit, Travis." And at first, I was kind of like, damn it. But then I was like, yeah, you're probably right. Like I would have bought the yacht and I would have taken off and I would have gone and lived on my yacht for the rest of my days on the far side of the world with my crew, right? Um, which I'm hindsight, would have been cool, but I'm kind of glad I didn't do that. Um, Also, one thing that I really found was really fun to learn was that compound interest. Einstein said that it's the greatest wonder in the world, and that if it didn't exist, they would have to invent it. And compound interest basically says for every $1 million that you have in the bank, you can draw about $30,000 off of about $1 million. So if you can live on $30,000 a year, well, you put $1 million in the bank. You need 60, well, you put two, and then a multiplier thereof. So I always thought that was really cool. Like if we can live on the compound interest, we're going to do really well. And I was lucky. I was very fortunate that my first wife was a high net worth individual also. So it didn't feel like she was there to steal my money. She wasn't there. She was coming in as an equal partner. And that was awesome. I mean, we were pretty much dollar to dollar the whole way through our marriage, which was really cool. Because there can be certain people that come out of the woodwork to try to what's the word that I try to use, to extricate your money from you. They try to get your money from you. And that side of things I did not see coming. I didn't know that. I knew that there were hustlers and scam artists. You hear about them on TV, you see them on TV, you hear about them in the paper, but like I did not know that people work their whole life being scam artists and they're really super good at it. And like that was another kind of, and they always play on the heartstrings too. They're really good ones. They'll find a passion for, oh, you want to save the oceans? Well, come and work with me and give me $4 million and we can save the oceans. I need $12 million and we're going to go save the dolphins. Like if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, Travis, I'm curious, for the majority of the world, you know, they'll work for many many years, probably close to 40 probably, and they'll always have that financial stress. You your life fortunately doesn't have that. Obviously everybody has financial stress, but you don't have that level of financial stress. I'm curious, how does life change when you're set, and that part of life is kind of figured out? Does it, you get more purpose driven, or how has your life changed?
Well, yeah, the 40-40-40 plan. You work for 40 hours a week for 40 grand a year for 40 years. And then you retire and they give you gold watch, and then you die, right? Like that's kind of like I watched my grandpa do that. I watched him work for 25 years for the same company, and he retired, and they gave him this cheesy ass watch with their logo on it and like a jacket. I'm sure there's stocks and all of that wrapped up that you don't really get to see, but I remember watching that thinking, to me, that's not job security. Like he knew what time he was waking up. He knew how long he was going to be at work. He knew what time he was getting home. He knew what time he was having dinner. He knew what time he was going to bed. He knew how much money he was going to pay in taxes, and he knew how much his bills were going to be, and he knew how much to the dollar, to the penny. And that never really set well with me. I don't know why, but I just didn't. I don't gamble. I do not like gambling. I'm not a gambler, and I'm not a huge risk taker, but if it's a calculated risk, I will. But I was never drawn to that life. That 9 to 5 life. And I would, as in the Virgin Islands, as 19, 20 years old, I'd come home to Salem. I'd come back to Salem, and I'd see my friends who were 20 years old, and they're doing the 20-year-old thing, trying to prepare themselves for the 40, 40, 40. Meanwhile, I've lived in Australia. I've traveled all over the world. I've done all of this. I come back and I no longer related to them or to that. And so I think from a very young age, I knew that I was not going to be that person. So having accepted that, consciously or unconsciously, I accepted financial insecurity, financial instability, and I would have to kill it in order to eat it. And so I'd take jobs on boats that would pay me enough to get by, and I'd have a fantastic adventure, but then at the end of the adventure, there would be no more money. I'd have to go find another adventure. And going through that got to be habit, and it got to be I kind of set my quality of life around having, I'd make $5,000 on the yacht in 1 week, and then I'd come off the yacht and I'd blow it on, whatever it was, I'd blow it on, and I would have no money, 3 weeks later. So that sort of financial roller coaster kind of became a stability really for me. And then when the money came, I think money really, people say this all the time, but like money, like exasperates the person. It's like whoever you were before, you're now that person on steroids, basically. And so, like I remember like one of the happiest days of my life was 5 years after I had more money in the bank than when I had started. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like I've lived a really good life for 5 years, and there's actually more than when I started with. Like this shit's working. This is really cool. But then, yeah, financial advisors, even at the big fancy firms, they steal money. They just will take it and walk away. And so I've had that happen. And but it's nice not having to look at the money as the first thought. I go to a restaurant, I want chicken. I don't look at how much it costs. I just order the chicken. And before, I'd look at the dollars and I'd go down the menu on the right-hand column and I'd say, okay, well, I can afford that. I got a hot dog. Okay, hot dog, but damn, I really wanted the chicken. So it's nice. It's nice having it's nice going to the good dentist, not the welfare dentist. It's nice to have a banker that you can call and say, hey, I need you to transfer this money to this account because I want to buy this, as opposed to going and waiting in line at the bank and going through the dailies. There's a very real difference between having money and not having money, and being able to witness it. I feel very lucky and very fortunate. And I can assure you that it's much nicer and much better to have money. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys access to the jet ski that you can have happy times on the jet ski.
Yep.
It can also buy organic, fresh food. It can buy a refrigerator to put that nice food into, and it can buy a home to put that refrigerator into. And if you don't have money, there's no reason to talk about organic food if you can't buy the food, or you can't buy the refrigerator, or you can't buy the house. So money is, in this day and age, in this capitalistic society that we're partaking in currently, we need money.
Mm.
And you know, having more of it is better than having less of it.
Yeah, 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 100%. Travis, I'm curious. I don't know the numbers, but you know, and I don't know how often you think about legacy, but like, you know, just thinking about Hydro Flask maybe being the most popular water bottle, or whatever, hundreds of millions of people have have one, right? Do you ever sit back and are you able to conceptualize your legacy forever, um for at least maybe the next 100 years, being cemented, and does that ever, are you able to, and not like in a cocky way, but like, just, are you able to fathom what you've accomplished?
Yeah, yes and no. Um, I still have a big part of me that's not done yet. you know,
Yeah.
like um, I love the feedback. I love having people tell me their stories about being hydrated. I love the stories of people telling me how much they love their hydro flask. And not because I did Hydro Flask, but because they're happy, they're hydrated. They, I gave them a product that they love. That makes me happy. I love that. But I heard that we're producing more single-use plastic water bottles today than we were 15 years ago. I feel like I'm not done yet. I feel like
Mm.
there's more I can do. I'm so glad that there's knockoffs, especially since I'm not in the business and I don't make any money from them anymore. I love that there's 1,000 knockoff water bottles, because that means all 1,000 of those brands are not putting out single-use bottles. All of their
Mm.
customers are not buying, nearly as many anyway, single-use plastic water bottles. I love that. I love that I've helped in at least a little tiny way protect our planet.
Mm.
But I'm not done. I still have more. I just, sometimes it gets like, I once knew a musician who lived in St. Croix, and I'm not going to say his name, but he was kind of a one hit wonder, is like he came out with the one hit, and that's all we heard on the radio, and that's all he was ever asked to play. And he would go to shopping malls and he'd play that one hit. And I always kind of felt like, is it better to have the one hit, or to not ever really have a hit and be striving for the whole album to be, or multiple hits?
Mm.
Um, so I don't know. Like I like my one hit's done well
Yeah.
for the planet, but I don't want to just be a one hit wonder, not just for Travis, but for the planet.
Mm.
Like my daughter, I want to protect my daughter's future. I want to enhance the planet now for my daughter, and not just for my generation and for my beaches that I go scuba diving at or I walk down, but for my daughter, and for like you said, legacy. And I know that Hydro Flask is doing that, but fuck, there's more. I sometimes get like, it's almost like I have writer's block for that next one hit.
Yeah.
It's like I'm waiting for a songwriter to come along and be like, Travis, I think this could be your next hit, because I do know that there's more inside of me and that I'm far from being finished. Um, and yet I don't want to go into politics and start down that path. I really don't want to do another uh, brand business like I did. It's almost a curse also, because I'm so curious about so much, and I constantly am striving to do better and better. And well, you know, I just haven't found it yet. How do I do better next? You know,
Yeah.
so it's bittersweet.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned it a little bit, but I'm curious, how has fatherhood changed you, and would do you have any advice to any future fathers?
A lot. Short answer. It's changed me a lot. Um, it was the single best decision I've ever made, hands down, bar none. I am so happy that I made the decision to be a father. It changed me. It rounded me out. As much as I thought that I knew a fair bit about this planet and about the far side of the world and about business and about women and everything and everyone I thought I knew, but having a child, oh, it knocked me back a step where I learned I don't know what I don't know. And my daughter teaches me so much every single day that I'm just so grateful for that. Um, it it settled me down to a geographical location, which, um, you know, um, I made a lot of sacrifices also traveling as much as I have. You know, like I build up a really good, solid base of friends and colleagues and neighbors, and the person at the post office and I would get along wonderfully. And then, shit, there I go. I'm off again, off in the wind, off to the next adventure. And I'd leave all of that behind. And I miss the woman at the post office. I miss those conversations. But now I'm on the other side of the planet doing something completely different. I miss those friends. I miss those holidays at their houses in Cornwall or wherever, in Australia or wherever. I miss those barbecues with friends and damn near family members and the back to the people at the post office. Like I miss those connections. And now I have that again. Now that I'm geographically located in one centralized location, I got a guy at the post office who I got to be careful because he'll chat for days if I'm not. So
Yeah.
I I appreciate it, and yet when my daughter turns 18, she can come with, but I probably right back out, and I want to go explore the the poles, the North and the South Pole. I really want to try to break on through to the other side and see what's out there because I think that there's a large conspiracy going on, um, and I don't like to talk about it because I get black limousines or not limousines but Suburbans following me if I talk about it too much. But we got a conspiracy going on that I hope that we start hearing and learning more about, and I kind of want to partake in that. Um, so I'm not dead yet, but yeah, fatherhood has been wonderful for me. It's really slowed me down, and it's leveled me out a bit.
Yeah. Travis, we don't need to talk about this if you don't want to. But obviously, um, we don't want to lose people to heroin addiction. Um, I'm curious, looking at your brother's life or things like that. Um, as someone that was a family member to him, does anything stand out um, with respect to talking about heroin or anything about his journey um, that you'd like to impart on maybe someone out there who's listening who might be whether it's heroin or some other drug um, where they might have a reflecting point listening to what you have to say.
I think that um, like it was so easy for him to get into it. And it was the last thing we anticipated or expected. None of our family, nobody who knew him would say, "Oh, Brian Michael, yeah, he's going to die of heroin." Like that was the furthest thing. He was always the golden child. He was always, our mom's favorite. He was the family's favorite. Everybody loved him more than they loved anybody else. And I can say that because I'm in the family.
Yeah.
Um, but it started out with he had lockjaw, and so they gave him prescription pills for the lockjaw. And then he got MRSA from wrestling in high school, and so they gave him pills for MRSA. And then his girlfriend was in the hospital, and he's in pain with the MRSA, and she's in pain, so they give her oxy cotton or codeine or cotton, or I don't know exactly. We just oxy, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So she gives him some oxy. Well, she died. His high school sweetheart died,
Wow.
and
Sorry.
which was a traumatic blow to him and to all of us, really. And but he couldn't get the oxy anymore. So where do you get oxy? Well, the drug dealer. Well, the drug dealer gives you oxy, but it's called heroin. And next thing you know, he's on heroin. And and then yeah, I mean it was one of those things where it was difficult to talk to him logically about the ramifications of his actions. I'd ask him, like, I would call it out and say, "You're on heroin." Like, once we knew what that meant and what that was, do you want to be cremated or buried? Because those are your options, and in and out of rehab over and over and over again. And I think one thing that I would like to kind of express is I feel that he was in and out of rehab, and I don't know the specifics of all of it. It's been a lot of years, and again, my head was down with Hydro Flask, and so I really kind of missed a lot of it. But my takeaway from it was that he was in rehab for X number of units of time. Let's say 28 days, 30 days, whatever it was, where he was not using heroin. When he got out, his body was theoretically clean. He had a clean system. It was functioning clean. Well, when it came time that he realized and decided to do heroin again, he went back and bought the same amount that he had done before he had gone into rehab.
Yeah.
So, and then I don't know this for a fact, but this has always been my gut feeling. It's like an alcoholic, like when I used to drink Budweiser on the deck of the dive shop and then go drink rum and Coke, I could drink a lot of Budweiser. I could drink a lot of rum and Coke, and I could get up at 6 o'clock and be at the dive shop at 7. And I could do this day in and day out. Well, now that I've stopped drinking, if I have 2 or 3 beers, I feel like shit,
Mm.
right? Like it does not work well with me. So so I don't drink. Well, I feel like Brian was doing, and I don't know if it's grams or ounces. I don't know I've never done heroin, so I don't really
Yeah.
know how it works really. But I feel like he was doing this amount, and then he got clean, and then he came out and he's like, "I'm going to do that amount, so just give me that amount." And then he did that amount, and then that amount killed him.
Yeah.
So I've always thought, like, I would like to know that the rehab centers are saying, "Look, if you do heroin again, which goes everything against our business plan, but
Mm.
if you do, make sure you start small
Yeah.
because you don't have the tolerance that you had when you went in."
That's a good point.
So, if you're out there and you're doing heroin or you're clean and you're thinking about getting back into it, like, and I don't even know if this is a true thing because again, I've never done it. I don't know. I don't like, even though my brother died from it, I never watched him do it. I don't know how
Yeah.
it's measured out in cc's or milligrams or grams or ounces or pounds. I have no idea. Start small,
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
small. Don't go back to where you were.
Yeah. Well,
And
thank you.
then also think about the family that you leave behind, you
Yeah.
know. Um, yeah, watching our mom find out, gosh dang, that was tough.
Yeah.
Like parents should not have to bury their children. And I think that that probably weighed heavily upon him, but the heroin kind of, the addiction sort of counterbalanced that. Because yeah, it's not, you know, it's not just about the person who dies. It's about the people who are left behind.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Travis, thank you. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. That you made some great points there. Um, we talked about quite a bit. Um, was there something that you wanted to talk about or on your mind that we didn't hit on?
Um, Boy, we covered a lot of ground,
Yeah.
didn't we? And we started at day one and came up to
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I think I think that if I can make a dent in the if I can help make the world a better place, that there's really not a lot of reason why anybody else cannot also. You just have to get up off the couch, and you just got to take the leap of faith. And like in the early days of business, I would be told, "Oh, you don't have any money. You owe the vendors. You don't have enough money to proceed." I didn't know, what does that mean? Are we going to jail? Like what? Like what happens next? And
Yeah.
and none of that happened. I
Yeah.
did not end up sleeping on the street. I've never, well, when I travel to foreign countries, I've slept on the streets when I was younger, just because I couldn't find a hostel. But I never became homeless. I've never, missed more than a couple meals at a time. And it it has been all worth it to take that leap and to go out there and try
Mm.
to better the planet, even in a small way. And I did not have aspirations of having trillions of bottles all over the world. And now that that's happened, awesome. I'm so grateful. But if I can do it, seriously, I don't know of anybody who could not also.
Yeah, that's an amazing message. Um, Travis, if anybody wants to, support you, what's the best way to do that?
Travis at tumalogroup.com, TUMALOGROUP. I'm not really on social media. I do have a LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. And sometimes I get those messages that come through, but yeah, probably email
Yeah,
is best. Yeah.
awesome. Well, Travis, I just want to acknowledge you. Thank you for sharing your, amazing life story from, scuba dive master to commercial airline pilot, to the, signs, the fencing and signs business. And then obviously to Hydro Flask, as I said before, I think, you know, maybe sometimes you can reflect on it, but it's amazing to see, hopefully for you that something that you thought of is now in hundreds of millions of households and stuff like that, and preventing plastic waste, and things like that. So thank you again for being on.
It's been awesome. I've had a really good time. It's been a heck of a journey just talking with you. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Arnav.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.